We are at the frontier of human-machine integration. So to explore this topic, we have pioneers in this topic. We've got Irena Cronin, the CEO, Infinite Retina, co-founder and SVP, Daros Technology. We have Johannes Peeters, CEO, VoxelSensors. We have Bharath Rajagopalan, Director of Strategic Marketing, STMicroelectronics. And we have Mike Stefanick, Senior Director of Product Management at Qualcomm. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and excited to be part of this conversation. Just to kick things off, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself to this panel and what you do, who are you, and what excites you to be here today. Yeah, let's start with you. You're just beside me, so.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Johannes, co-founder, CEO of VoxelSensors. At VoxelSensors, we're building the whole perception stack for wearables and for robotics. And that goes all the way from the physical devices, the sensors, but also what we call a context engine that triggers data collection from those kinds of devices, the wearables and the robotics, feeds that data towards AI models, and then deploy it back into the devices to enhance, let's say, assistive devices, agentic workflows, and in general, devices and people that can collaborate with each other in the real physical world.
That's great. That's interesting. So you're perfect fit to this panel.
Thank you.
Let's go with Mike.
Sure. Mike Stefanick. I'm in the product management group for the XR business at Qualcomm. I'm responsible for the software that Qualcomm delivers, BSP, OS, and then all perception technologies that sit on top of that. So the full software stack end-to-end in Qualcomm's XR portfolio.
Thank you. Irena.
Hi, my name's Irena Cronin, and I'm CEO of Infinite Retina, which helps businesses in AI and AR and other types of new technologies. And I'm also SVP of product of Daros Technology, which is building software for AI agents.
Thank you. You're last but not the least.
Good morning, everybody. Bharath Rajagopalan from STMicroelectronics, and happy to be here. So we are a very broad-based semiconductor company, and so I work on two areas: long-term strategy in AR, and the long-term strategy in healthcare in terms of biomarker monitoring. But for these purposes, I'm excited because we have a range of sensors that are contextually aware. And so taking those sensors and using the contextual awareness of those sensors and embedding it with other platforms can, I think, make for a very, very rich experience for physical AI, as you call it. So happy to be here and happy to have this discussion with you all.
Thank you, everyone. So let's start with something simple but yet foundational. I'd like to understand from each one of you, what does physical AI mean to you? Let's start with you.
All right. Good question, and I think there's a variety of ways to answer that. For me, it's really forward-thinking. If we at a certain moment want to have machines and people kind of coexisting and interaction with each other, we of course need to understand the world. Niantic's working on that with their geospatial map. NVIDIA's working on that with Cosmo and synthetic data. But we also need to root that in real data and the best real detailed data. And the best tool to do that is if we look into the world. But secondly, it's also the interactions we have with that world. And those can be very, very subtle, but very powerful. And very simple examples. We don't know each other that long yet, so I'm keeping a certain distance. With friends, you might get very close. Everybody has its individualities that we need to understand and transpose into our wearables or into a robotic world. And capturing those physical interactions and enabling the physical AI world, we need to grab that information, and that's why I think ST is working on context sensors, we're working on context-aware sensors, and of course the whole ecosystem needs to be built around that to get there. So physical AI for me, machine-human interactions in a physical world.
Perfect, that's a great lookout. Mike, can I ask you?
Yep, I think Johannes had a good summary there, but I think of semi or autonomous machines that can understand the physical world. We know that we've seen big steps forward recently in LLM, VLMs, but those understand the digital world and have a limited understanding of the physical world. And so certainly I agree that additional data, potentially from wearable devices, will be required to really enhance the understanding of those machines, of the physical world. So,
Irena?
I think it's human beings and robots understanding their environment, using AI doing that. Also, from a personal perspective, understanding the human being and their facial movements and stuff like that.
That's great.
You guys took all the ideas. No, but I'll agree. What I'll say is that, to me, physical AI is about being spatially and contextually aware. That's what it's really about. And it's unique to the point of view as a robot or human being. It's taking that point of view information spatially as well as contextually, and with that, being able to deliver whatever you want to deliver, right? That's what it really means to me in essence.
Amazing answers. It's similar perspective, but different worlds and different ideas, I guess. But we were talking about wearables being multimodal, spatial, but and physiological sensors and everything, which are getting this physical AI together. I wanted to ask you, what is that unique place in AI that can be done only with wearables? Do you think of any of that space?
I'll go first.
Yeah, yes, please.
All right, so today when we talk about physical AI, a lot of the training that's done is done with synthetic data or done with internet-based videos. Right? And then some of the training, a limited amount, is done with teleoperation. Right? You have the big rigs, human operator moving the robot around, but it limits the number of scenarios you can have, the number of tasks, because you have a big teleoperation rig. And as we move forward with wearables, you got a couple of different steps potentially, right? You have maybe an MR headset, you have some gloves, and you could potentially move that teleoperation around to more scenes because you can get rid of the rig. So that'd be one potential step forward in getting additional data to improve physical AI. Next step then, as we envision AI or AR glasses that have additional capabilities, they have the ability to map and understand the world, they have the ability to do gestures and hand tracking, they have the ability to do eye tracking. You can envision using that wearable device in everyday scenarios, right? It's out in the world. Right? You're collecting egocentric video, you're collecting all those data points as well, and using that to augment your physical AI training. And there have been a number of studies on this done with AR prototypes to show this is effective. So I think that's where wearables in an everyday scenario, people out in the world could be used, with their permission of course, to collect data that can be used to train physical AI or improve it.
Irena, your opinion on this?
Well, everything that Mike said, plus wearables using AI. So what do we mean by AI? Is that Gen AI? Is that AI with computer vision? Obviously, headsets have been using computer vision for a very long time along with cameras. So I think it's a confluence of all those three, the computer vision, along with Gen AI, and everything together makes wearables really compelling for the AI and physical AI.
That's great. Bharath, can I ask you?
No, I think I agree with everything you said. I think that the thing we're going to think about here is, what do we mean by AI, right? And that's really important. I think you're not talking about LLMs at the edge by any means, right? We're talking about machine learning and be able to then personalize that. And so the wearable's ideal to get that, again, to get the contextual data and the personal data, and that can then drive sort of what people call agents, right? Your AI agents locally. And so that's where I see wearables being very, very powerful, and AI coming into place very specifically through these kind of machine learning type of cores and similar elements.
At VoxelSensors, I guess you're pushing the limits of real-time spatial perception. So what is your take on what is that unique place in AI that can be done with wearables?
Well, I think it was someone of Qualcomm last year said that to me, that we are our own big data source. We generate a lot of information continuously that we can only capture through a wearable, and that is very hard to get otherwise. And so we can put big data rigs, etc. But essentially, a lot of our non-verbal cues gestures, the way we look at things, how we look at things, with quite kind of an attention level of what kind of an interest that is unique to a wearable. But it's not so trivial to get that information. When Mike was speaking about an MR device, we don't see people running around except in this trade show here. But in general, we don't see that many people running around with those. We see people quite a bit with the Ray-Ban Metas, so that's getting better, but you still cannot run those continuously capturing data. So we need to be very, very selective in our data capture. There's a privacy concern, there's an ethics concern, but also just limitations of the devices. And a lot of that information that we would capture is very redundant. We're talking, that context didn't change since the last, I don't know how long we're talking now, 10 minutes. So there's probably no need to capture the whole 10 minutes, but different states that change, different cues that we have. And that's what we try to do, understand that, and then when the context changes, capture a moment of information and send that off for training.
I mean, that's very interesting. Like, I feel also when you're talking about data privacy and trust and low power AI, but can ultra power AI still be trustworthy and accurate for us? Do you think so? What would be the future?
I think we go there. If you would have asked that question 10 years ago, the answer might maybe have been a little different. Meanwhile, we also know much better how to keep a certain privacy element physically on the devices and on the compute platforms, and we have ways to put governance in place that privacy-sensitive information cannot leave the device and is in a trusted zone. But in the end, if we ever want our second brain, like Jensen was having on stage at one of the NVIDIA conferences, the little blue robot, we need to find ways to transpose how we look into the world in that robot, right? And that's an opt-in, it needs to be consent by the people that are using it. But to advance that world, we have no other choice than understand it better. But it's the industry's, I would say the industry's responsibility to do that in a ethical way.
But what do you think of it? Can this ultra power AI be still trustworthy and accurate?
I mean, I think that's certainly an area that Qualcomm's focused on, right? You know, we talked about bringing new capabilities to the AR chipset, focusing on performance per watt, right? Making an effective AI engine on the glass at a very effective, power point. In fact, in our keynote on Tuesday, we announced the Air 1 Plus, and in that we showed an SLM, 1 billion parameter SLM, running on the glass, right? No cloud, no puck, along with ASR and TTS as well. So I mean, I feel like the NPU is getting there, and it will only get more powerful. And one of the key, I think, benefits of that would be the ability to do some pre-processing of data on the device, such that you don't need to stream, raw data off of the device. You can stream instead insights, I think, and that's really the powerful kind of where AI can help with privacy on the device.
Oh, that's a great lookout. Do you have your insights on this?
Yes, I think that on device and on the edge, it's very reliable to be able to get really good data, especially when you're using small or narrow LLMs. So you don't need all that power to be able to get the data in. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think from ST point of view as well, right? We think about it quite a bit. So our sort of focus is on the edge, living on the edge, if you will. And so I'll give you an example. We have IMU, initial monitoring unit, with the embedded machine learning core. It runs a microamps of current, and to your point, it does not give you raw quaternion data, but it gives you contextual data. So for example, it'll tell you, am I jumping, am I running, I turn left, or I turn right? That's the data you get, not the raw data, for example. From a processing perspective, we have secure platforms as well. So we have a neural processing edge compute device, which not only runs low power, but has secure elements as well. So we can do security there at the edge. And finally, in the future, we're looking to think about how we harden security on sensors themselves. There's no answer just yet, but we're trying to work more and more and bring secure down to the hardware layer as opposed to software layer. So those are the elements. So I think, yes, it's absolutely accurate today, and they're getting even more accurate as sensing technology becomes more and more advanced. And yes, we can be secure, but that really depends on the user and the architecture as well. So.
But on that note, do you see any biggest hurdles in balancing all these, whatever you're mentioning about performance, battery life, for instance, the wearables, the AI, the data, privacy and everything? What are the biggest hurdles? Can you point out 2 or 3? We can start with, Irena, please.
One of the biggest hurdles is actually the hardware that's being used, so the wearables themselves. I mean, it's really wonderful to try out all the new headsets here and in other places, but there's still a lot that needs to be overcome. The weight, the power usage, the way the UI and UX is built, which is very difficult for these headset product managers to actually get their hands around. So I think one of the biggest hurdles is actually getting that right first before you're able to actually utilize the AI to make the AI and the headset work together.
So I guess if wearables is a very broad term. Well, if you mean actually wearables in terms of glasses, that's a separate question. I mean, it's a subset of that. And again, it's what you said, right? What do you care about? You care about style, size, power, weight, right? That's the most important thing at the end of the day. If you have bad style, stop right there, right? If you have style and then power, that's great, but if it's heavy, it doesn't matter, right? So balancing that is super important, of course, as we know. And that's really a challenge, and that really comes back to application use case. If you want to be all things to all people, you want to have infinite field of view and zero power and zero cost and everything else, it's not going to work. So bounding the solution space and bounding the application space is really important. That'll then dictate the architecture, but again, size, weight, power, style, form factor.
How are you addressing them, Mike?
So I think we've shown that for the kind of the current use cases, we've got a consumer acceptable form factor. Again, I'm thinking wearable glasses, right? I think the question, or the interesting question here when we talk about balancing power, performance, weight, et cetera, battery life, we have to look at, as we add capabilities, like we know where we are today and it works. As we add capabilities, we add displays, initially relatively low FOV displays, but as they get more immersive, we're going to bring in more additional capability, potentially rendering either on a host device or on the glass. We're going to bring in potentially perception. We have some mapping, we have some hand tracking, we have some eye tracking. And I think the interesting problem is actually where does each of those components run, right? What runs on the wearable itself? What runs on the host companion device or in the cloud, I guess? But I mean, a host companion as a phone or a puck of some sort. How do we properly balance that? And there's not one answer, I'm sure. I'm sure there are many answers. It depends on the use cases, right? Using a simple example of hand tracking or gestures and playing a game, I want the lowest latency experience. Power's probably not a concern. I want to go to a navigation. I'm flipping through my text, or I want to respond. Latency probably not as big of a deal. I want to offload more of the compute, if at all possible, to the companion device, right? So I think that's a really complicated problem to balance the functionality as we split between either the cloud or a puck and the actual wearable device, so that we can offer these sorts of advanced capabilities, add new capabilities, but strive to keep the form factor, where it consumer acceptable. So.
Yeah, Johannes.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I just wanted to maybe zoom a bit more on the application or the use, right? We see the biggest adoption into the real wearables or digital eyewear or smart eyewear, whatever you call it, which essentially does the same as you can do with your phone. So today I would say it's still for early adopters and a gimmick, and that need to transpose into something that is really unique to wearables. Like we talked about being our own big data source, and that is what a wearable can bring. What you can do on your if you look at the numbers, right? There's a billion smartphones. The wearables is a fraction of that, and even the smartphones are declining. It's not that the wearables are filling in that void, not yet. And so there are obviously things we need to do in order to make people see this category as something that they need in order to do something, and that's something you cannot get anywhere else. Once we're there, once we have millions, tens of millions of those devices into the world, this whole discussion will be, okay, what kind of data will those devices provide that we can then tap into? And that can go to healthcare. I think you guys are working on that as well. That can go to enhancing robotic behavior. There's an enormous possibility down the road. But today we need to figure out which of the sensors do we need to get in there to have an experience that people want to buy, to then accept that we tap into that data and then advance the rest of the world.
That's a great lookout, actually. And being it use case scenarios, ask me about it. Every use case is different, and each and every environment or each and every requirement is different for every human autonomy system or human robotic system, or when we are putting in collaborative or co-creative workflows and everything. I'll just skip the line and go to Irena. Irena, your work spans across turning XR platforms for intelligent insights and analytics. How do you see immersive data visualization and AI-driven decision support fitting into the broader version of this physical AI?
So it's not much for data visualization, but for AI decision making, which is really key. And Johannes brought up something really important about where decision making is actually made. There's a change that is being, that occurs. And with physical AI, trying to figure out where those changes are and whether they're appropriate for what you're trying to do is incredibly important. So that's where I'm working at most of the time with AI, with companies and with different verticals.
Mike, you have any inputs on this? Or any others? Like Bharath, Jonas? No, not on air, David. Okay. But what kinds of business or personal decision making will benefit most from this kind of embodied and contextualized AI, for instance, especially on physical AI and wearables and everything? What do you think, Jonas?
Oh, I think we're just at the beginning of all of that. Actually, on the show floor here, for people who want to see booth 428, we made a very, very simple agent. And so we're in a conversation. I'm a bit jet-lagged from flying in out of Europe. My attention sometimes wanders off a little bit. And what we're showing is that the agent we're building based on the technologies and the sensing technologies we're providing actually captures that change in attention from me and could summarize the last question from you if I didn't catch it. And that's just a very, very small thing once we know more contextual understanding of people. But I don't think there's this one, everybody's always talking about a killer app, there's this one killer app that we identified as an industry that's, oh, that's what everybody's gonna buy. Everyone has its own needs and its own preferences. But understanding that from people, understanding people better, will open up a lot of opportunities.
Yes, please, Irene.
In terms of businesses, I think all verticals that are outward facing, so they need to get data and information coming back to them to figure out what to do in their businesses. That's where physical AI works really well. And with wearables, you could do that very easily, let's say for retail, to figure out where a person is looking or where they've changed their gaze, to be able to figure out what they're interested in healthcare as well, to see if someone's actually sick with some kind of disease, which in the future is going to be more and more applicable with the types of AI that are being used right now. And entertainment, like I said, where change happens. So where's the person about to go? Where have they been before? And what are they looking forward to? You could pretty much see by their visual face, by their eyes and their expression. So I think most verticals will actually benefit. And in terms of personal, it's more turning it around to third person. So watching how a person is actually taking in the data is important.
Okay, but we are talking about this whole lot of data and the captured data from these wearables and everything. But I want to understand because you are big players in this kind of edge computing, spatial recognition, AI-driven data capturing and everything. But what do you need to consider around the ethical grounds about data ownership in these kind of environments and with wearables? What do you think? Let's start with you, Bharath.
I have no answer. That is the crux of the matter, right? And my fear is that, I'll just speak for myself, not for any company. My fear is that we won't answer that question first. We'll come back to it later, right? And that's always been the conundrum. It's been true all along in any platform. When do privacy, ownership, the ethics, really important questions. I just don't know if, I think the industry moves so much faster than that catches up, quite frankly, right? I think it's important, for sure. I think ethics is clearly important. Security is clearly important. Safety and data privacy, it's absolutely important. But in terms of implementing, I don't have an answer for that, right? It's something that we all should talk about more and address, but I don't know if there's any clear answer here.
I agree. There isn't a clear answer. It's a huge question, of course. I mentioned this earlier. I think one way to mitigate the concern a little bit is to do some processing of personal data, video, audio on the local device or on a device that you control at the edge, something like that, such that you're sharing insights as opposed to raw data about the person. But still, the question around privacy and the ownership of even those insights does remain, and it is a big question.
But I think there are things we can learn from the industry already. Yeah? If you look at face authentication, for example, that is trained on the generic model is trained on people that have been paid for providing their data, and then the individual model is trained on yourself, and that never leaves the device, right? So I think all these non-verbal behaviors, we can do similar things and say, okay, we have a generic model, maybe it's 70% good, 80% good, and then whatever's individual to us will be stored, processed, fine-tuned on the chipsets or maybe on the edge, but within your realm, let's say. And so I think it's not exactly clear yet how everything needs to be done, but I think there's good examples that we can reuse, and we better start thinking about it now from the beginning to implement that in a good way.
Irena.
Yeah, there are many companies in this industry actually that have hired ethicists and philosophers. So for example, Meta hired quite a few philosophers that I know to try to answer these questions. So it goes beyond just the technical features. It goes into trying to figure out humanity, basically. Where do humans want to have their privacy? Another thing is data ownership. So there are a lot of companies out there right now, that actually starting over 10 years ago, that tried to figure out how data ownership should be configured, whether you should be able to get money for your data and all that kind of stuff. There hasn't really been a great company so far to figure that out, but I think in the future there will be.
Yeah, I have a say in this. We also do a lot of work into human autonomy systems, and where AI can take over some kind of work from the user or from the operator when the operator is feeling dizzy or falling down or something. But then the question comes back to responsible AI, how responsible is this? Is it really that, does it have that power, that much power to actually overcome and take over the job and get into the autopilot or autonomy systems? Yeah, that's incredible. But bringing this AI and wearables requires, I think, not only advanced and low-power hardware, but also intuitive and user-centric softwares, which makes this complex intelligence really accessible. But I wanted to understand from your perspectives, how do you see sensor innovation in AI working along these lines, like the workflows, creating scalable environments, meaningful XR experiences, and UI-centric or UX-centric experiences? How do you see that, Johannes?
that was a long question, sorry. And I think I need my agent now to summarize it for me.
that would be a cool thing to do. Like you have a chip, and like I wanted to understand, how do you see sensor innovation in AI addressing this UI and scalable environments?
Oh, I think there's, for me, a lot of where I would think and where I would love things to go is when we have anticipating interfaces over reactive interfaces. So instead of, like the agent I just told, instead of saying, hey Meta, take a photo and describe it, that it would say, hey Johannes, I think this is interesting for you. There's folks in the room here that you know. And, or instead of me asking my agent, can you describe that that question that was just posed, I would say, hey, you looked not attentive. I'll do it for you. And here's the suggestion. And that's something that you can really do with sensors and sensors on wearables that you cannot do today on the existing devices, and not on your smartphone either, because that one is in your pocket. And sensors are crucial to really get that contextual understanding, and it goes from, could be EEG signals, could be eye tracking signals, could be gestures, could be all kinds of non-verbal cues together with audio. And we see the beginnings of that. So what we're working on, for example, we see what ST is working on in that aspect, but we all need to get it integrated, small, cheap, elegant, and I think that's the road ahead of us.
Bharath,
Yeah, I was just saying, sensors are fundamental, right? That's the last foot, is the sensor. Without that, there's no, they can't do anything. So I think fundamentally, sensor advancement is crucial, right? To get contextual awareness, where you are, how you're feeling, right? What you're actually sensing. So get your POV, see what you see, hear what you hear, feel what you feel. That's part and parcel, fundamental to physical AI, or else what does it mean, right? So yes, sensors are certainly important, and I think that's one part of it, of course. I think I take the data, they have to process and other things, but at a very core, that's the input. So I think,
Yeah, I mean, from the Qualcomm perspective, we work with many of the different sensor providers in this space to kind of understand the new technology, work with them to potentially integrate, or at least do a proof of concept of integration, identify any bottlenecks between the new sensor tech and the core, the AR or XR chipset. In some cases, we do have a reference design as well, so we can kind of prove this out and do a full end-to-end test. But I do agree, the new sensors are going to be important to enabling these types of kind of always-on, always-aware sort of use cases with an AR glass. And we need to make sure that we have the right integration, that we can run those on an AR glass in a very, very low power way, since it is always on. And from our perspective, we're ready to do that with by integrating what makes sense, into the chipset and being able to offload some of the algorithms. But I mean, that's kind of the piece that needs to happen over the next couple of years.
So intelligent physical wearables, I can say.
Yeah. and it goes. Oh, sorry. It goes further than just the hardware as well, because imagine that we have all those sensors in a device. You still don't want to enable them at all times. There needs to be some kind of a little modulation in there that says, hey, attention changed, what is it, right? What happened? And then enable other sensors. And so a bit like, again, the face authentication that switches on the first sensors and IMU, I think. If there's movement, then the next one, in order to get to a reading of your authentication. Same in wearables. So sensors, yes, and then a smart way to manage them.
Smart way to scale them also.
Yeah.
Irena, do you have your opinion?
So there basically is balance. You have to have a balance between numbers of sensors and trying to figure out what they're actually measuring. So it'd be great to measure everything. You have to really get a good sense of what you want to measure, and then see if there are any gaps there and keep adding to it. So it's a combination of having really good engineering and product managers and companies understanding what they're actually looking for.
That's great. So we are bringing this AI to this physical wearables and everything. But what are the biggest challenges or hurdles you see in this yeah, take the topic today, like physical wearables helping reaching AI. So what are the biggest hurdles you see?
I think putting everything together in a useful device. It's easy to put sensors on a device. If you look at the Apple Vision Pro, it's a marvel of engineering, full of sensors, but not very practical to use. The Ray-Ban Meta is the other side of the spectrum, has one good, it's a few sensors inside, but one good RGB sensor, but it cannot do that much. And so if you want people to adopt it, you need to give them a reason to adopt it. And I think we can be there with the Ray-Ban Metas Plus. And then once the adoption is there, I think it's the baseline for physical AI to tap into that unseen world. And we'll learn more and more. Like I agree what you said earlier, Irena, but for example, eye diseases. Very hard to figure that out today because the data from patients is not there. You go to the optician once and they take a snapshot and that's it. But if you have a constant ability to look into the eyes of people, you can much better see the deterioration of certain conditions and potentially improve them. But the data isn't there, and the ability to see that isn't there. But once we have wearables with sensors, that allows for a lot of physical AI, healthcare-related experiences.
Mike, what do you see the biggest hurdles?
I think I touched on it earlier. It is, to me, it's the proper distribution of the system from the wearable, because we did talk about, yes, we have kind of the high-end Vision Pro, we have the current Ray-Ban. Obviously, we're marching towards something that's very clearly in the middle, some sort of intelligent wearable, obviously. And as we bring in additional capabilities to that wearable, getting the right split between the on-device component and either the proximate compute or the cloud. To me, that's I don't know. I think that's the most complicated problem. So that we can add these capabilities without without impacting the form factor, still achieving all-day battery life, right? We have to hold to those metrics, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge for me, at least.
Irena, what do you see?
I think it has to do with software, so sensor software, trying to understand how and what the sensor is looking for. And we're always talking about hardware, but the software end is pretty much not talked too much about. So I know Johannes thinks the same way, that in order to understand what's generalized in front of you versus what should actually be paid attention to is an extremely hard thing. So the software that is actually enabled by the sensor should be able to figure that out. But there's so many questions as to what it actually should be taking into account and how it should figure that out. So that's the hardest point for me.
Yeah. Bharath.
Yeah, I'll say this way. I see all upside here, right? I see all challenge. I mean, don't talk about hurdles, but let me flip it around. I think we're at the very beginning of a revolution in terms of wearables writ large. We talk about glasses, but I want to go beyond glasses, right? It's more than this. It's patches, rings, buds, and you just name it. All these devices have sensors of various kinds, measuring different kinds of aspects of your environment, both internally and externally. And so what I see in the future is just a really rich space of having highly personalized agents, right? That's going to really can enable a real breakthrough in terms of how we interact with devices and how we use services and how we can benefit from that. There's a dark side, but I won't go there. But that's the bright side. So I'll end with that. I see a lot of opportunities, right? There's always hurdles: size, weight, power, form factor, software integration. Yeah, for sure. But that's all very specific to a particular application. So that's going to drive that, right? But that can't be generic. But I'll tell you, there's lots of applications out there that are emerging. And with adding biosensors on top of that, it's going to be a very, very different landscape in a few years, and a very good one, I think. So.
That's great. There are a lot of key takeaways. We've got hardware, we've got correlation, we've got the sensors, we've got the UI. So a lot of key takeaways from this panel today to work upon and come back with answers for the next AWE, I guess. But, okay, to wrap us up, I'd like to go around with a lightning round. It'll be fun. Don't, it could be your bold prediction or a hope, or what do you see in the future, whichever comes onto your mind, you can tell me. So tell me on this, like, what's most exciting outcome of these wearables enabling physical AI?
Oh, I know it's a lightning question, but I still need to think a little bit about it because there's many things. I think ultimately, for me, a wearable needs to be helpful to me. It needs to give me what we call this kind of superpowers. But it shouldn't be dystopian. It shouldn't be kind of out there moonshots. There can be really helpful things we can already do today, like these little agents that we were talking about. And it's not that far out. And I think we need to, like what Mike was saying earlier, we need to find the right balance between a useful device for a certain purpose, and the purpose shouldn't be do everything. The purpose should be do a few things really, really good. And I think that's within reach.
Yes, Irena or Mike.
So there was a panel here before us in gaming, and they were talking about how AR spaces in the future will be built with AR in mind. So I've always thought that over the last 10 years, actually, and I was so happy to hear that. So that's something for the future that I think, I don't know how long it's going to take. You know, it might take 5 years from now. It all depends on you know, how the uptake of wearables is, the glasses and headsets and all that kind of stuff. But also I'm very excited about the mapping of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have to figure out what that means and what detail you want to capture. But the more we capture that is relevant to someone and to companies, I think is very important.
If I may just comment on that, because I forgot who it was. So, was a gentleman talking to me, and he said, if spaces are built with AR in mind, and we can have cars with windshields and heads-up displays or wearables, and we can remove all the traffic lights and all the signage, etc., the world would look so much prettier, while still keeping the traffic rules, etc., in place. And so I think if there's that's longer out there, of course, and longer term thinking, but this industry has the capacity to bring back parts of the world that we cherish so much, while still keeping the dynamics of the world in place. So yeah, I see that.
Yeah, Mike, what's the most exciting?
So I guess I'm most excited about the timing here. So there's a lot of work going on right now, a lot of research right now on physical AI, and you know, are they out of data or running low on data, I guess, from the standard internet, and the ability for the wearable to kind of fill that gap. I think the timing is perfect because we're at the point we were talking earlier. The wearable has to be right form factor. It's got to offer enough value. I think we're there. I think the AI agent gives us that initial use case. I think it'll continue to grow, and it's exactly at the point though where you need the additional data on the physical AI side. So the timing of it coming together, it feels really like it's lined up really well. So I think that's encouraging.
Bharath.
Contextually aware, personalized AI assistance. That's what I think is really interesting. That's it.
That's great. So that's a wrap for today. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Or come a little closer, maybe, then.
So right now I create large-scale AR experiences that cover city blocks, and to do that I have to use like a 50K LiDAR scanner, and it's really great until the environment changes. And Mike, you mentioned we'll be able to update our spatial data from collecting data from users, and I just wanted to know if there's any software available today to help us do that, because that's our biggest problem.
So you're looking for, not necessarily today, I guess, right, on the wearable device, right, for the spatial.
We're mainly using people's phones for these experiences, so.
Sorry, maybe I'm the only one. I'm having a bit of trouble understanding, sorry.
Yeah, the mic, I think the mic is not
It's
so
like
clear.
garbled almost, sorry.
I mean, right now, most people have phones,
Yep.
so we're using people's phones data.
Of course.
Yep.
So the question is, when would we expect to be able to collect such data, not from the phone, but from a pair of glasses?
Or is there any software available today to help us do this? Like, for example, we are taking screenshots every 2 seconds and uploading that to a cloud and trying to analyze that data with AI, and it's just kind of shit. So I'm just like, I'm trying to find some shortcuts here if anyone's solved that problem.
I think Niantic is working on that with Niantic Spatial, getting a good mapping of the world. It's not in the highest precision, so it depends a bit on what your needs are. At the same time, the world's physical buildings don't change that much over time. But what we're talking about here, at least from my perspective from a sensor world, is really the smaller details and the mutant objects in the world that need a real understanding in real time. If you need a scan of the world, you're currently stuck with photogrammetry and LiDAR sensors, which is all expensive. But once the world is mapped fully in detail, then your problem is going to be resolved. But it will still take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I just haven't seen any plausible way of mapping the world right now. So. And the Niantic, I went to that presentation and it was, like, he didn't suggest anything. And Aoki was like, at least they've got like this QR codes everywhere combined with like collecting RGB data from the phones. And that was like the best solution that I've seen right now, but my clients don't want to put QR codes everywhere.
Well, there are a number of people actually that have been talking for a few years about autonomous vehicles capturing the environment and being able to do that in such minutia that you actually don't need to have all that camera set up. So I think that actually might be the future. It's just going to take a number of years for the cars to go to as many places as possible, to the major cities, to be able to capture the world like that.
But they don't go into buildings.
What's that?
They don't go into buildings.
Yeah.
The inside.
So then we need the
Into
foot
buildings,
traffic.
yes, they are actually, Google's been doing that for a few years now, going into buildings, going into restaurants and stuff like that, capturing that.
But that's actually a very interesting analogy to make. What the wearable world could be very well what Tesla has been doing to the world of cars. The initial Teslas were driven by people, capturing the world, and then over time, as data became available, they improved their models to be semi-autonomous and then towards autonomy. Same with wearables. The more people go around inside, outside of buildings, capturing data, relevant data, privacy-protected data from those buildings and those surroundings, we'll get better and better models to do what you want to do.
And then you hit the privacy problem. Sorry.
No, it's
Playing
okay.
devil's advocate.
All right, one more question. This gentleman here, and then over to you in the center.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious if any of you is working with any research universities in the academic labs. If so, what projects are you funding, and are you interested in seeing the results of? I'm just curious, because in the wearable space, it's so early, and that just feels like one of the key generators of new IP and new ways of doing it.
I can, from our end, answer that. Yes, we are. We are building specific research tools. Since the type of data that we provide is very different than typical sensors. And it's the first time we can start collecting that data on a larger scale. And so that probably has a lot of valuable insights to generate, but we haven't seen or done it yet. And so we'd love to have people look at the data that we provide and study it and see what can be done with it.
Yeah, I think if your question is, do you work at the universities? And yes, the answer is yes. We work with a lot of universities, primarily in Europe, but also in the US as well, in many different areas, right? So we can talk offline if you have some particular interest, but as a company, we have a lot of relationship with a number of universities in a range of technologies. so it's two for part from that.
Hi, I wanted to, great discussion, thank you. I wanted to follow up on Irena's comment about software. I'm very concerned or interested in maintaining the meaning and semantic connection between AI and sensors. Do ontologies play a role in this? Data modeling, is that a critical function in maintaining the meaningful connection? And do we need humans to create them?
Well, you can sort of say that there's a connection to NLP that you can maybe look at in terms of visual NLP and understanding surroundings, but that's getting a little bit too philosophical. So in terms of ontologies, if you want to look into that into more detail, it's actually what is it that exists and what are you looking for? And how do you actually categorize those things? So that's kind of like NLP in a way, you know? So yeah, and like who is interested in actually getting this data and what do they want it for? Those are the essential questions, I think.
All right, we have one last question. We'll keep it pretty short just so we wrap up, but I think this gentleman here.
Apple announced Apple Intelligence a few months ago that sounded very similar to many of the things you said and is supposedly available now. So two questions. One is, what is the difference between what you're talking about and what they're proposing? And secondly, how far away are we from what you're proposing?
So I think that we are quite far away in terms of it not happening now. There are a lot of companies that are looking into trying to figure out how to slice up the world and understanding the environment. But in terms of actually getting, let's say, extreme detail about a person's face and trying to figure out the movements of the face, what they mean, besides just eye gazing, is, I think, kind of elemental right now and not understood by a lot of companies how they're actually going to use this. So there's a lot of separate kinds of companies that have to figure that out as well. So the short answer is it's not here right now, and it might take a number of years for that environment to build up.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much. It was a great panel and great insights from each one of you. And I think we have a lot to take away from today's panel for next year to try to work towards these aspects and solve them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.